Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic on Twitch, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast, here with episode number 196. It is Sunday, the 13th of June, 2021. We are 2 days formally, technically, into E3, so we thought it would be good to take a halfway stop break by the wayside, grab our water bottles off our bikes. You'll get that pun later in the show. And go ahead and brief out everything that we've heard so far, because we've heard far more than we anticipated. Let me tell you, to say that this show was rapidly put together would be an understatement. We got full-on ambushed by the games industry this weekend and in the last couple days leading up to E3. We thought that this was going to be a slow show. We were going to kind of be able to do this at a light jog. We would just be able to compress it to one show. And after the Summer Games Fest kickoff, we kind of started sensing the hordes about to come over the wall. So we rapidly spent the next couple days pulling together another show. Here with me tonight, I have all of my co-hosts, as they have now been conscripted to be for 2 episodes of E3 coverage. Started with Mr. DBQ Habs. How you doing, DBQ?
We were right. This is going to be a lot to cover, and I'm glad that everybody's here to have this conversation. So plenty to chew on tonight. So let's I won't ramble on because we got lots to talk about.
Right. As well, we have Mr. Swissguard. How you doing, Sir Swiss?
Doing well, but E2KG never has a problem filling time, so.
All right, and as well, we have along Mr. Towmaster 99. How you doing, Tal?
I'm doing good. We're doing it old school this time.
Good. That's very true. So, without much further ado, let's get started. We're going to kick things off with DBQ primarily handling the Wheels of Steel on this segment, because I think you were the only one who watched the Devolver Digital presser.
Yeah, I enjoy the Devolver goofball.
Oh, in Swiss.
Did you watch it as well, Swiss?
Yeah, I watched most of it.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple years, it's probably 3 years running with their characterization, where they've had the same character kind of coming through. And the series joke was about subscription services and things like that. But there's a lot. Well, there wasn't a ton actually, but there were some things that I wanted to kind of highlight. And Swiss, you can bounce a few here as well. Phantom Abyss looks really kind of fun. I can see my son and I kind of diving into this. So this is it. It looks like it should live in VR, but it doesn't. But it's kind of first person. It's like an endless runner, or you're running through a temple as traps are being set and you're trying to stay alive, and you see ghosts of other actual players, and so you see where other people have died. So they call it kind of a multiplayer game because you're seeing where people have died and where they've made it through. So it has some of that kind of trials aspect of how do you pull off this trick? How do you make this jump? How do you combo this together? And so it looks really interesting, and it's coming early access to Steam on the 22nd of June. So plenty of opportunity to see more of it, but something that just the concept of it kind of struck my interest. The other two, conceptually wise, that kind of struck my interest were Wizard with a Gun, which is a roguelike, which we've got plenty of, but the kind of hand-drawn animation style. Yes, sir. Thanks for raising your hand.
I wanted to catch you before you went. It sounds like as you're going into Wizard with a Gun, it tipped one of the things that I was kind of in tune to with this year's set of press conferences. Let me go back to Phantom. Was Phantom Abyss a roguelike?
I don't think so. I mean, it seems like you're basically trying to run to the end of get out of the temple. You're kind of escaping. I would guess there's multiple different temples, or it's procedurally generated. It can't be, because they have the ability to show you where other people died. So it must be a set number of levels, but we don't know that much about it at this point.
It's almost like to me, it struck me like a roguelike, mixed with Mirror's Edge, like Temple Run mashed with the Mirror's Edge parkour type thing, with some of the like the Phantom stuff thrown in there.
Yeah, I definitely got the kind of like first person Temple Run aspect of it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Wizard with a Gun, just a fun art style. Hand-drawn, or at least it looks hand-drawn, right? I mean, it looks kind of cartoony. And then another art style that I really, Devolver always does well with their 8 and 16-bit like art styles, where they've had things like, Gato Roboto and Ape Out and a number of kind of minimalist aspects there before. Hotline Miami. But so Demon Throttle looks like an old Nintendo game, 8-bit with a kind of like bullet hell aspect to it. 2 players looks kind of fun. Actually, it looks really kind of fun. But the other piece of it is it's only on Switch. It's only coming out physical, and it's in one of those limited release kind of boutique aspects of things. So I'm kind of curious on that model. I mean, I guess it definitely does tailor to the collector there, but also allows them to kind of minimize their overhead in terms of producing units. Swiss, anything else from Devolver that struck your fancy?
You know, I kind of went in and they kept, like you said, playing their, E3 kind of theme of they have the storyline and everything. But in a way, like, it was a little bit refreshing because it felt like a little bit more E3 than the rest of what we've been seeing. But just because they have a little bit more of a spectacle. But the as far as the games are concerned, the one that piqued my interest was Wizard with a Gun as well. Until I actually saw the gameplay, and then I'm like, if it's gonna be too roguelike, we'll see. But I like the concept and the like the weird Final Fantasy IX Good, Bad, the Ugly trailer was pretty cool. So
yeah, right. It almost did look like a Black Mage in terms of the Final Fantasy aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The only other game I want to quick shout out is Inscription, which is a card battler horror game, but it's developed by the Pony Island studio, or the developers, a couple guys, which is a really kind of meta game where you starts off as kind of a side-scrolling platformer and then breaks down into code and all kinds of other. It goes along in that Frog Fractions type of way where the base game is not what you actually see. I mean, what it starts with is not what it ends with, and so it'd be interesting to see what they do with kind of a card battler as well.
Very good, very good. So, in my understanding is, having not watched the presentation, that it was the same kind of, I don't want to say hamming it up, but kind of, yeah, the Devolver Digital standard, which is always was kind of designed to buck the trend and kind of be, I mean, because it used to be Devolver Digital originally would do their conference kind of off-site, outside the main conference.
Right, and they would do it at like 10 o'clock at night after
Right.
everything else had been shut down, and it was
Right.
kind of like an after party. Yeah,
Yep.
so they've always had this tone to them to some degree.
Okay.
I will say that to DB mentioned, like, the theme was subscription services, games as a service, and there was one line that kind of hit home for me, and she said something to the effect of like how they can be raking in all the cash, and then, let's be honest, you keep playing a game that you don't really like anymore anyways. And it was just like, oh wow, that Destiny 2. But anyway.
No, that's an interesting philosophy, because I mean, just it's a perspective to have, right? Because my perspective, actually, in my commentary, has been the opposite, right? That people, particularly like the Destiny 2 community, not saying you guys, because your guys' criticisms are pertinent, right? But there's a very large swath of the internet that complains about things that I feel are really not things to be complained about, simply to complain about something. And as I mentioned, it was the case with Destiny 2, right? People do all the complaining about it, and yet, right, the game breaks in. I mean, people obviously don't hate it that much if they're continuing to play it for as long as they have. So anything else to mention on Devolver Digital? All right, let's go on and talk.
Let's keep on moving.
Yeah, let's go on and talk about Gearbox's entertainment presentation. Now, Gearbox, this is part of the weirdness now, right? And we actually later on we have a very small bit to talk about Koch Media's presentation. Thank goodness that someone finally pronounced it in the open air and publicly, so I could get over the awkwardness of how you actually pronounce that word. Although I did hear that it seems like the Americans pronounce it Koch or Coach, and then when I tended to hear a European say it, they mentioned something else. Now, but help me out. I think DB, you might be the one who knows. Gearbox is now part of the Embracer Group, correct?
Yep, they're part of the Embracer Group along with Saber and a few others. Yep.
Right. So this presentation, along with Coach's presentation, was very strange to me because I'm like, who? Because Saber was at Coach's presentation, and then I was like, this is really an Embracer joint presentation. It's not really like Coach Media specifically. So, but then Gearbox has their own thing, and I was like, I don't know what's going on now. Maybe Gearbox had their setup beforehand. I'm not sure, or maybe just Randy Pitchford had to have his own thing, which wouldn't surprise me at all. But hey, in this presentation, we got one of the things that drummed me up to one of the heights of my exuberance during this E3 run, which is that not only are we getting Homeworld remastered, which I don't know that we really needed a Homeworld remastered. Wasn't Homeworld remastered when it was republished onto Steam as a Gearbox title versus under its old Vivendi Universal Sierra label? Swiss, do you know?
I'm pretty sure you're right because I have it in my wish list, and every now and then it pops up on sale as like Homeworld remastered. So like I don't. There's something. You're right. There's something out there already floating around.
Yeah.
But I thought I heard somebody mention. They said this isn't Homeworld remastered. This is Homeworld 3. So I don't know if they were trying to allay some confusion or not, or if there are two games out there.
Well, that's what I took away from the press conference, and that's the way I interpreted it. So there was kind of a lengthy like background about the history of Homeworld presented by I guess it was the creative director. I didn't write the name or the position down specifically, but I think the head, whoever's in charge of development on Homeworld Remastered, briefed and talked about that. And then after he was done and his presentation closed out, then they presented a quick roller that said Homeworld 3 was under development. That to me is a distinct title. So I think they're taking Homeworld 1 and 2 and re-rolling them. Again, I don't really know what needed to be remastered other than if they're I don't recall that Homeworld 1 and 2 ever got 4K assets. So unless they're getting 4K assets and higher textures, maybe there is some quality of life things that could definitely be done, right? Because Homeworld it was fun, but it was always like a cerebral weight, right, to manage in terms of its 3D implementation. But what got me really excited was the notion that Homeworld 3, after we just got Deserts of Karak a few years ago, to hear that Homeworld 3 is properly in development was pretty exciting.
They didn't really do like a nice deep dive though. They kind of peppered it inside all the other pieces, which I'm like you. That was the game that from that whole show that most interested me, and it was that you get like a snippet, and then you had to watch something that you didn't care about, and then you got another snippet.
Right. But I'm fine with Homeworld Remastered too. I'll take more Homeworld, right? If there's something worthwhile to be put in there. The other thing in the show that caught my eye was Aragami 2, and I think this was the second time we saw this game.
Are we moving on to Guerilla before we?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it's like I said,
Okay.
It's been a long
Before
day.
we jump out of Gearbox, that's
Yeah,
okay. We talked about Tribes of Midgard back on Thursday's show. I still think that as an action RPG looks pretty interesting, coming out in July. I really am curious what Godfall looks like or plays like on PlayStation 4 because of the fact that this was hyped as only possible on PC or PlayStation 5. So the fact that numbers wise, sales wise, it makes a whole lot of sense. But performance wise, I'll be interested to know what they've tweaked in order to make that functionable. So, Guerilla Collective, go for it. Aragami 2.
No, thanks. So Guerilla Collective Part 2, which is kind of were there a total of like 3 or 4 different indie showcases around this
Guerilla
time?
Collective had one last week, and
Okay.
then they had another one this week. That's where the parts come from.
But I don't just mean Guerilla Collective, I mean just in total, right? There just seem to be multiple shows to showcase indies. We're seeing some of these titles 2 or 3 times. I don't know in the whole makeup that there's really a necessity, because as you'll tell from this show, there's a high volume of numbers of these indie titles, but they don't really make as big as industry splash or an impact on the art from what we've seen, I think. But
I think the benefit that I found for this show and the wholesome one is that it does give a little more time to some of those, or the wholesome one, and we'll talk about that later too. But the fact that it doesn't just become a quick hit in a big AAA publisher on an Xbox stage or something like that, that it does give a little more time potentially to it. But you're right, it does have the potential to also get lost in the deluge that we talked about at the beginning of the show.
right, I mean, especially the wholesome one, like you mentioned, we'll talk about that later. Like, I just got to a point where I was like, they're going over 75 titles. Like, and in some cases, they're just flashed on the screen. There's no gameplay. Sometimes you just get a title and a splash image. So it's a thing. But Aragami 2 caught my eye during the Guerilla Collective show. It invokes a lot of feelings of things that I've seen before, but packages them all together, right? It kind of makes me think of Ninja Gaiden in some ways. There's a game that probably nobody plays or remembers, but there was a game maybe 7 years ago called Tech 3001, I think it was called, where you kind of look like the Terminator, and it's kind of not an endless runner, but it's an elevated over behind the shoulder kind of view, and you have the you have the jump mechanic that was kind of similar in this trailer, where you jump, and that's primarily, it's a 45-degree angle, so it's half vertical, half horizontal move, and then you can hit another move that drives you, straight forward horizontally, which you saw in this trailer as the person like bamfed into some type of mist form. It made me wonder. I'm hoping that this is kind of the Ninja Gaiden that is for everyone else, right? Because we make a big deal about Souls games now, and games like Sekiro. Swiss, would you please pronounce it for me? Because I know I'm butchering it.
Sekiro.
Sekiro. Okay.
Sekiro.
But also, before those games, Ninja Gaiden was just as difficult, right? And I would often play a Ninja Gaiden game and then hit a point where I'm just like, okay, yeah, it just platform jumped like its difficulty level, and there's no way in heck I'm going to proceed any further forward. So I'm very interested. It's a one of the themes of the shows this year too was a lot of games have these really beautiful elements of fluidity in their movements, even in the 2D side-scrolling games, in a way that kind of evokes feelings of when you see like a great martial arts movie or something where there's like great fight choreography. It gives you that cinematic feel as you're watching it. And this is one of those games that I liked also the progression that I saw, which gives you like 8 to 10 different skills. Yes, it's an analog scroll wheel, on top of the UI, but it presented the fact that you're not going to get like 3 skills to use at any one time, kind of like you do in a Crisis type of game. So it's coming September 17th to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 4 and 5. Another thing that I saw that caught my eye was Ghost Runner, which I didn't play last year. Did any of you guys play Ghost Runner last year? But Swiss mentioned Mirror's Edge. Ghost Runner is another kind of heavily parkour-oriented game. It's coming up with a physical release, and it's going to Nintendo Switch, which I think is going to provide a great opportunity for those of us who skipped it last year to pack it up with us and take it on the go on Nintendo Switch. I'm assuming that it's getting a digital download release also.
It's already on Switch, I believe.
Is
Isn't
it on
just
Switch?
the
Is it
digital?
digital?
I'll look. You keep talking.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then a game that really, really, really caught my eye because, as Swiss and I talked a couple of weeks ago, I still have very memorable psychological scarring from my experience in Doom Eternal. And we got Bullets Per Minute, which looks a lot like a Doom kind of game. This is from a developer, Platonic Friends. That's coming out on PC and then comes to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One this summer, so it's coming to the legacy consoles. Of course, it should be playable on the next-gen consoles. It's just that it doesn't feature their optimizations and enhancements. But Bullets Per Minute is a game that basically it looks like Doom, except it's also a rhythm game. So you're rewarded for not only firing, but firing on the beat in conjunction with its custom-made soundtrack. And that plays into the effectiveness of your attacks, say, in boss battles. You are constantly rewarded with loot, which I think is a design element that should overcome kind of the Destiny kind of effect that I sometimes feel, where I'm in a really big fight and then I defeat something and then I'm like, that guy didn't drop any engrams, right? So hopefully that'll be a good hook as well. So it was
So what
interesting.
consoles is that coming to? Because it's out on PC now already.
It's out on PC. It is coming to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One.
Okay, there we go. Yep. And so is Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider's on Switch. Came out in December. So
Okay, so it's just the physical release that's coming out, right? Which is good, because often with large gigabyte downloads on the Nintendo Switch, I prefer to buy physical, so that it doesn't constantly eat away at my memory card. And the last thing that I'll mention from the Guerilla Collective Part 2 presentation was this was the last game, or one of the last games, was a game called The Light of the Darkness. And this evokes another trend that I saw. So big trends that I saw were highly fluid movements and mechanics in indie titles specifically, but also specifically in 2D games. A lot of games that made me feel like they were very Ori-like. In fact, I feel like this is the year where an Ori-like game is a thing. Whereas Ori kind of owned that space almost on its own for the last few E3s, all of a sudden now there seems to be this explosion of 2D side-scrolling games that have really beautiful art, really fluid movements, and are really characterized by an extreme amount of verticality, where as you go through the stratifications of the atmosphere, right, the environments change, right? So you go from underwater, all the way up to cloud-like environments and all sorts of things in between that seem to be a common game design that we saw in volume. So Light of the Darkness was one of those kind of games. It comes out in 2022, it's coming to PC, and this is a game that evokes from a fictional material perspective, makes me feel a little bit like it's kind of oriented around like a Dante's Inferno kind of story. So it appears to be a lot about like an angels and demons kind of setup, where the main character is some type of hybrid, who it appears at least the elements of darkness referred to as an abomination. It wouldn't surprise me if the light refers to him as the same way, and part of the story is about this being who combines elements of both sides, but by by that nature is not accepted by either side. So I'll be keeping an eye on that title. That one appeared very interesting to me. Let's go on very quickly and talk about Koch Media. Again, you mentioned the things, it's kind of all over the place to me from a corporate perspective, and I think that's going to be a difficult thing for what really is the THQ Nordic organization, that eventually elevated itself up to become Embracer, and then THQ Nordic became more of a studio, or at least a publisher, and not so much the group lead. But you've got at least 8 sectors, 8 studio divisions, 8 publisher divisions that each also have their own studios in this group, and it can get very confusing. I mean, it's confusing to us, and we pay attention to all this stuff. What the relationships are between Saber, Koch, Great Scott, who knows who else. And on top of all that, this is also now the publishing group that is becoming renowned because they have something like 122 titles, right, actively under development and in flight. So it's a weird play, and definitely something that's where they're targeting themselves becoming a bigger player on the market, and raising themselves up to a level where they can challenge other significant publishers. The one thing that really popped out to me in this press conference is Todd Hollinshead, who is the former head of id, left and became head of Saber Publishing, I think last year sometime. So this is a big name, id. Basically half of the brain trust of id, with John Carmack having left to join Oculus. Todd Hollinshead, and one of the big pushes from Koch Media is about their new premium label called Prime Matter. Again, I go back to, so is Prime Matter a subsidiary of Koch, who's a subsidiary of the Embracer Group? It's not clear to me. If they are, then why is Todd Hollinshead in charge of it? Because he's the head of another division that's supposed to be the equivalent of Koch Media, Saber Interactive. So I don't know. I assume maybe Todd, from all of his first-person shooter experience, was was brought in to help out Prime Matter, and somewhere between Prime Matter or Koch, they themselves also have 12 titles actively in flight. So, but one of those is Painkiller, or a new iteration in the Painkiller story, which I kind of orient in my mind as something that kind of evokes a gritty story that's in that vein of what I remember Max Payne being about at the time. Although this is, one that's more about spiritual elements than drug elements, as Max Payne, the original Max Payne was. But I'm excited to hear that Painkiller is coming back. Interesting now too, and I don't know how the IP story went, but obviously that was originally developed by People Can Fly. What are they working on now, DB?
People Can Fly. They're the Outriders team. So,
Okay.
Yep.
So they have moved on. Somehow that IP wound up in the Embracer Group, and so now it's being picked up to be worked on. What's really exciting about this is this fall, and Tao feels me on this. This fall is becoming a literal corporate industrial battle royale of first person shooters. Like, some of the most beloved first person shooter franchises are all converging with releases this fall. It's going to be super exciting. And now we've got Painkiller in the mix as well. They haven't given a date, so I don't think it's by any means coming out this fall. But it's just exciting to hear, an additional drumbeat in the Painkiller, in the shooter genre news cadence. So let's go on and talk quickly about the PC gaming show. Tao, you and I both watched this. Have you been paying any attention to Chivalry 2 at all?
No, but I'm going to because this looks like a pretty awesome game. I don't know how I never saw this series before. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Just kind of this, melee, old school battle, or not old school, I should say, like knights and stuff battle. It looks really awesome. I'm actually going to be paying attention to this one now and coming to the Xbox, so that's a plus.
So this is one I'm going to be paying attention to as well. In fact, it was on my list to pick up for a new video game day, and I had wavered on it because I was like, I don't know about the longevity of this, and like a beat 'em up, like how long is that going to last? But Tao, this is a game that, minus the melee elements of it, is firmly in your wheelhouse. It's multiplayer only. It has no single player campaign.
Yeah.
It's a paid title, not free to play Swiss, so it's a game that's going to make you pay for it. Tao, what is it that's attracting you to this game besides the things you just mentioned? I mean, how do you see this game fitting with your like Fortnite, Rocket League, Call of Duty?
Yeah. Just another feather in my hat, I guess. Yeah, a big, I think it was 64 players, I believe it said, during the trailer. Just like I mean, I'm into the big battle, and obviously I don't think it's battle royale, as far as I can tell. It's just, teams, I'm assuming, or every man for himself, possibly. I don't know. I didn't get to dive too deep into it yet, but yeah, I mean, just like I said before, just kind of the gameplay and just something different, I mean, it's not guns, there might be bows and arrows and maybe like a catapult or something, but I just like the melee aspect of it. Just it's something different than just running and gunning all the time. So, and dismemberment, it's always good, a good thing, I suppose.
So DBQ, Swiss, you both appreciate historical elements, as I do. Anything of that notion attract you to a title like Chivalry 2?
I mean, I like the medieval setting, and there's a game coming later in the show that will be set there. But I'm not sure that hack and slash every time I've tried a multiplayer like melee game, I've come up really disappointed. So, yeah, I probably may hold off and then see how excited you guys get about it if you end up picking it up.
Yeah, I think my historic games usually tend to land on the strategy side, so maybe we'll come back to that later in the show, as was said.
Well, I think, like I said, I was thinking about picking this up for a new video game day. In the dialogue about this in the interview, the head of development mentioned. So across, and quite honestly, all these shows run together. As I mentioned, it's kind of an indie-ish title, so it came up in multiple shows. Um, so, but throughout across the shows, one of the things that was mentioned was the roadmap. And so, as we've been talking about in the last recent weeks about season passes and battle passes and how those things play out and how they play out on the industry, one of the things I mentioned on Twitter today, in the controversy about Battlefield's approach and EA's approach, Chivalry 2 is taking the same kind of approach. It has no single player campaign. They're going to make you pay for it. It's in competition with every other game of this style that's around. Now, one of the differences that's very interesting is their roadmap, which includes today a healthy amount of DLC, is not paid. So they're talking about you getting these things for free. We have another game that's going to be giving out DLC for free here that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But that was one of the things that tipped me over. One of the things that tipped me over was the development lead talking about how, kind of in the same way that medieval times was, because warfare was not necessarily repeatable. It was a unique experience almost every single time you went to a new setting. And he talked about, each map is kind of going to be its own game, right? Your tactics and strategies, which is kind of a little bit of the same thing you have with World of Tanks, where each map kind of can radically change the strategy. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a toe dip and try. It's $40 on PlayStation 5 right now. Just to maybe just participate in this roadmap, because I can see myself. Maybe I don't play the game a lot. Maybe I don't stick with it as much as a Call of Duty. But I could see dedicating like a week-ish to play it, and then as new maps come out, going back and revisiting that map. So really interesting strategy. Another game that, so maybe Chivalry 2 will be successful. A game that maybe hasn't necessarily found its formulaic approach to success in endgame and post-launch content is Square Enix's Avengers. And so as we go on to talk about the Square Enix Presents presentation, DBQ, you want to talk about what they queued up and had in store for the fans today for Avengers?
Sure. Yeah. I think, as you talk about roadmaps and planned and realized roadmaps, and I think Crystal Dynamics and everybody who has played or followed the Avengers knows that the roadmap aspect of that has not been successful or has been kind of strung out a little bit. But they refer to the roadmap today at it. They show kind of where they're at. They just finished up the Black Widow event, or they're finishing it up and they're heading into a Cosmic Cube event, which looks kind of interesting from kind of a arena aspect of the different, kind of moving a little bit of the narrative forward, but giving you some different kind of arenas to battle in. And then they're moving into, which is supposed to come this summer, they're moving into a patrol aspect, which really strikes me similar to kind of the Destiny patrol aspect, where you're going to be able to go back into, and which those maps, the individual world maps, are incredibly big. I've spent a lot of time kind of wandering around in them, hunting down a chest here and there, but there's so much unrealized or unutilized landscape that they have created that this seems like a logical connection, is to put additional kind of little patrols in it, or little boss battles, or the equivalent of Destiny's public events. So this is supposed to be coming this summer. They did not get a hard and fast date with that, just like we did not get any date with the Wakanda update around Black Panther and that expansion that's scheduled for this fall. But there was, when they hit the stinger title screen at the end with all the different platforms that it's on, there was no date, not even a fall date in there. So we will see we'll see where that comes. It looks really good. It looks interesting. I think people that have fallen off but have enjoyed the gameplay of the Avengers, me being one of them, will probably, dip my toes back in to see what that looks like when this comes out. But again, I think the fact that they didn't attach any date to it is really what I was looking for. Like, the setting is going to be good. They do a fine job with combat. In terms of a brawler, it really becomes a matter of when they can hit release dates. So that part with Crystal Dynamics is still up in question.
So let me ask you a question, DBQ. One thing that I found weird in the presentation with the Avengers is why not... So I saw lots of characters, and I'm a comic book guy, right? I saw lots of characters. Some of them I remember their names, some of them I don't. I'm like, who is that guy? Why not a sizzle reel or a roll call of like new characters that were presented? Were those new characters or are those ones that are already in game, or is it just not making promises, or like what was it? 'Cause, and that's the point for me, for somebody who's sitting on the edge going, is Avengers moving into a point where it's healthy enough to warrant me onboarding? It just presented, it came across to me as like, here's a bunch of characters that we've been working on, but we're not going to say whether or not we're going to put them in the game or not.
So everybody, before you get to Wakanda, is already in the game. Like, and in some ways, they don't have a sizzle reel to do because they've only added 2 characters up until this point. And this game launched back in September. So we're coming on, we're 3/4 of a year through it. The only 2 characters they have added at this point are Kate Bishop as Hawkeye back in December, and then Clinton Barton as Hawkeye back in mid-spring, March, I think. So a sizzle reel, maybe you could get different cosmetics, which the community is also pretty divided on because they have, either overcharged or have not put a lot of things that the community really wants and just a lot of recolor skins. So I don't know that a sizzle reel would have helped them in terms of buy-in for people that have any, experience with this.
Right. And I mean, some of the skins are like Thor in plaid shirt and jeans. So I don't know if that warrants, however much they're charging for skins.
Looked like a white dinner jacket, Hulk. So who doesn't want, casual dining attire Hulk?
I actually thought,
Lumberjack Thor.
And I saw the back, so I thought it was actually Banner in the lab coat. But what about the villains? Like I saw Maestro in there, so is that character already in the game?
Oh, Maestro? No, I don't know. That must be a new one. Monica was in the original narrative,
okay,
and she's taken a much larger role there in the DLC stuff because she kind of has a continuing storyline outside of kind of the main campaign piece. Okay. So you saw her kind of working with the Cosmic Cube in the Cosmic Cube piece. So we'll see. Yeah, Maestro. Oh yeah, Maestro came out in the most recent, the Hawkeye one from March, where they kind of go into the future and kind of the dystopian aspect of that. Maestro's there, and that's one of the patrol areas that will be coming back as well.
Okay, cool. And is Monica Captain Marvel already in the game, or?
No, this is Monica, the AIM scientist.
Oh, okay, so, not Monica Rambeau.
No, not Monica Rambeau. Yep, different.
Gotcha. Let's go on and talk about some more superhero stuff. This, however, I felt that the Avengers stuff was confusing and not confidence-inspiring. This other thing, though, this was a banger. So can you talk us through that a little bit, DBQ?
Sure, let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy from the Montreal team. I got to double check this. Yes, it's the Montreal team. This is Deus Ex. This is what they've been working on. We knew what Crystal Dynamics was doing with after Tomb Raider, and now we know what the Montreal team has been doing after the most recent Deus Ex. And
specifically the Eidos Montreal team.
Yes, Eidos Montreal. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, because they were Eidos before. Yes.
Yeah, because they were. I mean, so the last thing this team did was a redo of Thief on console, I want to say.
No, didn't they do Deus Ex Human Revolution?
True. Yep. Yeah. And they may have. Were they? Yeah, I forget where the Tomb Raider.
They did both of the.
But...
No, they. I don't. Well, maybe they did the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, right? Because that was the final Tomb Raider trilogy was done outside. But anyhow, they've definitely been working on this for a while because for the amount that they showed, seeing a 2021 an October release date was not surprising. That for so many games over this weekend where we saw some really nice trailers, but not a whole lot of gameplay, and not a lot of extended gameplay. As you said, Game Logic, this is a lot of confidence here. They were ready to show this off. They were ready to build some hype and kind of dive in. It also feels, and I'm not going to be the only one on the internet saying this because I've already read it elsewhere. Thank you, Paul Tassi, that it is like the anti-Avengers game. Like, for all my snark about the Avengers right before here, this is a single player game. There is no roadmap. There is no DLC. Here you go. There's characters, but you're only going to play Star-Lord, and you're going to interact with them. In some ways, the interactions feel a little bit potentially Mass Effect Alpha Protocol like, in terms of maybe they make some branching choices. We'll see what that actually comes out to be. But it was, the gunplay and kind of the combo aspect of it feels maybe not quite Devil May Cry, but in that kind of, you got a little bit of fantastic, and there were a couple pop-ups there on the screen when you were comboing back and forth, but they do lean into the MCU a little bit with, it looks like you can trigger kind of ultimates where your team works together and you'd listen to some 70s, 80s jams in Star-Lord style. So again, a lot more gameplay here than I expected.
So can I go ahead and say it so we can get it out of the way? This is the game that Avengers should have been. Like, I don't get it. And it's really weird. And help me out in the press conference again. So which did they do? They did Guardians
This
of the Galaxy
was their lead.
first.
Guardians was their top of the show, and they were in this for 20 minutes or more. Yeah.
Like,
yep.
And then they follow it up with Avengers, and it fell flat because you spent 20 minutes watching Guardians of the Galaxy, which looked like a polished game. Looks better than the Avengers to me does now, and I don't know. And it's interesting because we talked a lot about timing when the Avengers was coming out, and like how it came out on the heel of. Did it come out on the heels of Infinity War or Endgame?
Avengers came out last September.
Yeah,
so it was after everything.
It took a while to get out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but we started seeing it while those movies were still coming out, and I remember, like, it just felt so strange to be looking at Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. Like, you could see them in a trailer, right, or having recently seen the movie, and then see these video game characters, which almost felt like they were deliberately skewed to not look like Captain America, at least. Like, it felt like everyone else was done okay, and then Captain America was just some strangely differentiated character model, and I didn't understand it. These are a little variated, but one of the things is, because the tone is so spot on accurate with the movie, like, I didn't find that as bothersome. Like, I don't know that the Avengers tone of the game is the same as the movie, but Guardians of the Galaxy definitely is. I felt like that could have easily just been another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It was quite impressive and amazing. Especially, how do you nail Rocket Raccoon? Like, Bradley Cooper, that rendition is so specifically hyper unique to his performance, and yet, I mean, and granted, we don't know who the voice actors are for this necessarily, but I didn't see, like, we saw the character motion people, that definitely wasn't, Bradley Cooper, and,
No, the Rocket sounds different, but I think you're right. Sorry to step on the answer, Swiss. But, for me, the tone of it, like the vibe was very much in that kind of quip, but not necessarily the same intonations.
Yeah, but very close. I mean, I just felt like the line delivery was almost like very similar. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Swiss.
I was just gonna say, I'm not like a huge comic book guy, and like not even. I mean, I've seen a lot of the MCU movies, not all of them, but my family did enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy and 1 and 2, but this game excites me because it's like, let's take the stuff that you like about Guardians of the Galaxy and let you experience it, instead of starting with a monetization model and trying to shoehorn a popular IP around it. And it's like, I hope it does well and teaches everyone a lesson. But then again, this is coming from PlayStation guy, like single player experience PlayStation guy. But
I think that's
I'm excited about it.
I think that's spot on. The thing that I've always felt was the trip up with Avengers was that I don't mind the notion of going in and playing Captain America for a single adventure, right? Maybe even for an adventure and you're going to drop an expansion pack. Not what we think about as DLC today, but let's talk about a true good old dyed in the wool expansion pack. And you're going to drop that like at the 12-month point or the 18-month point, whatever. Like, but I'm not excited by the notion of becoming Captain America and playing like season passes and playing that, right? Like my Guardian in Destiny 2. So it's just a weird thing. I think I was impressed with Guardians of the Galaxy. Are you guys
Can I
ready?
say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can
Yeah.
I say something? Sorry, real quick.
Yep.
Because I watched the trailer at least for this, and it's a good mix of like you said, like the movies, but also the characters are a little bit more comic accurate, especially Star Lord and Gamora. Um, and I just thought that was kind of an interesting mix how they had kind of mixed both things, but you know, it's a totally original thing, original story too, and interesting that when I first read that you can only play Star Lord, I was like, I don't know about that. It'd be kind of nice to like kind of flip around people, but I guess it might be more cohesive to tell a story. Just that you know you're playing that one person instead of kind of jumping around people.
The combat struck me as the most recent game that I played that the analogy was Final Fantasy 15 when I gave that a spin, because it was like you have the party together. Yeah, you're Star Lord, but it looked like there was ways that you could kind of give commands to the other players.
Yeah.
So it didn't, you weren't. I feel like you control the party to a certain extent, primarily through Star Lord. So
That's a really probably very apt comparison there, Swiss. If you think about development time and in studio resources, or at least shared across the larger developer publisher, right? Like that would be something that they could look at in terms of how you could do that kind of group combat, but in a way that keeps the narrative on a single and keeps the gameplay on a single person. Yep. And in terms of comic book accurate, Tao, I am such an easy mark. I saw the pre-order bonus to get like the classic Drax Destroyer costume or some of the old ones. I'm like, but after feeling the way I feel about Avengers, even in this hype, I do want to see a little bit more of this but again, so much more confident in this than anything they ever showed leading up to the release of the Avengers.
Well, I think that's a key point too. Is I mean, like the whole time we were rolling down the hill on Avengers, we were like Crystal Dynamics, like we just don't know that they have those chops, and we're not like again not being inspired to confidence. This is Eidos Montreal. I have complete confidence that they can pull this off after seeing Deus Ex, after seeing Tomb Raider, and again those are single player games, but the point is they're employing those same mechanics. It's in the same kind of development framework and stylistic approach. It's just they're giving you some NPCs. And so really quickly, just on the history of Eidos Montreal, just so we cover this, it's they did do Deus Ex Human Revolution in 2011, which I didn't think was particularly popular, but they did do the Thief remake in 2014, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which is a game that I played, which I loved. And then they did do Shadow of the Tomb Raider, was the last thing that they did, and now Guardians of the Galaxy. So let's cut to the meat on the bone, so to speak. Ubisoft Forward, probably one of the most highly anticipated shows in this E3 run. They've been one of the big three publishers. I would say between Ubi, EA, and I don't know, maybe Bethesda, were in the past have been one of the most anticipated shows to come onto the floor. They started off the show with Rainbow Six Extraction. I am pumped. Comes out on September 16th to Xbox, all platforms, PlayStation, all platforms, PC, and Stadia. It will have crossplay. I believe at launch. I don't believe that they mentioned that there would be a delay in that. Rainbow Six Extraction takes the operators from Rainbow Six Siege, has them work together instead of against each other, combines them into some new governmental agency team that's responding to some, what I presume is an alien threat. There's a quarantine zone. I got the impression through the multiple interviews, again, this is another package that kind of went on for like 20 minutes or so because they showed some cinema, Then they went to the community manager, and then they showed, and then they did some developer interviews, and then they showed some actual gameplay. But so I get the sense in across all of those talks that there's some element of the map being kind of persistent. So with the way that the I think they're called Achaeans or something like that, um, with the mention of how the ooze kind of spreads and morphs depending on what your mission results and things are. I think the thing that I found, I mean, I'm excited about a lot of elements of it. But one of the things that I felt was most exciting is if you go back to Rainbow Six, I want to say Rogue Spear, but which was an expansion pack. I can't remember the title of the actual core game, which I think was the third Rainbow Six game during that time when it was only on PC. Um, but we'll look that up. But the point is that one of the critical elements in that game was that, and Ghost Recon did this as well, the very first one, which came out shortly after Rogue Spear, but was that if you had a limited roster of agents, right, of specialized named agents, and then you could have like an unlimited number of like generic agents who didn't have any special skills, but you had a limited number of operators, which were actually founded in the Tom Clancy novels. But if you took one of them on mission and they got shot, they could potentially not be available for the next mission, right? They would need healing and recovery and recuperation time. And one of the things that was mentioned in this presser was the same thing, that you could go on a mission, one of your operators could get abducted, and then they would then not be available for the follow-on mission. And on top of that, one of your follow-on missions would be you would have to mount a rescue to go get that person. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I didn't really hear exactly how that would work if you were working like in a team with other people, and one of the other people was playing that operator. Like whose operator inventory does that person get decremented from? But one of the lead programmers did mention that it's a 1 to 3 person co-op, so you can apparently queue up and play this game by yourself, or you can go in with, shall I say, your fire team, a la Destiny 2 with your 3 people, and go in and play this adventure, which sounds like it's a long-term, emergent, persistent kind of campaign environment. Anything else that you gentlemen felt from... All of us watched the Ubisoft presentation, so I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are as well.
This looks cool and all, but I hate to do this, but this is E2KG, so I want to bring us down a little bit. Man, I just want an old school Rainbow Six game. Like, I mean, like, it looks cool. Like, the aliens look cool, and they have the gadgets and stuff we still kind of use like in the past games. But man, I really wish we would have just like a straight up, like you mentioned, Rogue Spear, just like straight up like, okay, there's terrorists. Let's just do terrorists again, please, and let's just do that. But that's just me. I mean, it does look cool, and yeah, I'll probably play it eventually. But especially since it's I guess kind of like you said, even it's just PvE. There's no PvP in this one as far as we know. I don't think we've seen any PvP stuff come into this game at all. But yeah, that's all I want to say. And I'm sorry to bring us down.
Oh, I mean, I like that it's PvE because I much prefer PvE type gameplay over PvP. But I just wanted a Splinter Cell.
Okay, fine. I'll bring us back up. I think that this is to me, this looks fun because it takes Ubisoft has done, the dev team on Rainbow Six Siege has done a ton of work since the release on creating characters, giving them backstories, even in the Rainbow Six Siege little backstory animated clip that we got, right? They've given a lot of story to characters that basically you see the hands of, and then you run around and shoot the other characters. So this gives them an opportunity to kind of leverage some of that, throw it into a PvE model that allows people to play with existing frameworks and archetypes that they're already familiar with if they're coming from Siege. And it throws it into something, the whole aspect of going deeper into some of the extraction points or whatever they called them as you were going down multiple levels of different phases, and that you could lose almost like not quite a roguelike, but right there is that they talked about it as a risk reward. Like if you went down further into you could lose some of the gear, your progression. So how far you want to go down or how much you want to pull back out into kind of the dungeon aspect of that will be an interesting, how they, be an
I
interesting
hope they.
dynamic, how that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I like. I'm intrigued by the game, but as long as it doesn't get too grindy. So if it's like that level of like, are you willing to push farther into a more difficult level rather than, collect 500 bajillion whatevers to put in the forge to make 36 more other things to place in the other.
Somebody's a little Bungie bitter.
There's gonna be shards and canisters of stuff, goo you could probably collect
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
we'll see how, like, if it's based if they go that direction rather than the grind, like I'll be much, I'll get really excited about it.
So my only concern is the 4v, the PvE aspect of 4-player co-op. We're gonna get Rainbow Six Extraction. We're gonna get the Anacrusis game that coming out from former Left 4 Dead Turtle Rock people. We're gonna get Turtle Rock's new game with Back for Blood. We've got the Evil Dead game. There's a couple others maybe that I'm not quite thinking of, but it feels like, as you said, Game Logic, like we went through the wave of battle royales, and this fall we're heading into a wave of co-op survival aspects. So if it cuts through, and hopefully it cuts, given the player base within Siege, it has the ability to cut through just by if it can tap in and pull some of those people.
Yeah, I feel like Extraction is the good compromise. Like it's clear that and this is Rainbow Six that has moved, right? So the Siege team is not the team from Red Storm, right? That started Rainbow Six back in the day in North Carolina, right? This is an Ubisoft kind of proper team. And in fact, Red Storm team, I think it's like the backup team or the team that helps with like assets and is the assist team now. Clear that team doesn't want to do, and I get it, Prime. That's how I agree with you. Like I would love to get back to that formula, but clear that team that doesn't want to do that, and maybe because they feel like it's been done. But this is a good kind of middle ground where you still get that co-op experience that we used to get with Rainbow Six Vegas, right? But it's just PvE and it's not against terrorists. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And I hear what you're saying, DBQ. I feel like there's maybe a little more standout differentiation than when we went through the Battle Royale glut. Because I feel like, I respect Battle Royale for what it is. I just don't know that there's a lot of extensibility or elasticity in what those systems are. They seem to all kind of come back to a core, and there maybe can't be that much differentiation. I don't know. But I feel like...
I think, go ahead. Finish up before.
I just feel like all of these... look, I'm excited. I feel like if you chose to, this could be your fall, right? You could just play Back for Blood, Anacrusis, Redfall, which we're going to talk about later, and Rainbow Six Extraction this fall, and that could be your meat and potatoes, and all of that's not paid, right? That could be an economical approach to gaming. One of the things we'll have to revisit, and we can unpack at some point later, is, hey, we thought that this would have been a solid play for Resident Evil. I think, was it Resident Evil Quarantine that was packaged with the 3 remake?
Yeah, it came in with the 3, yep.
Yeah, and that thing came out and did a peep and a flutter, and it's nowhere to be seen or heard from. So what went wrong there? I don't know. But let's talk about something that I want to risk to say that we're all super excited about. Let's talk about Far Cry 6. Giancarlo Esposito, amazingly excited about that as well. Far Cry 6, my biggest concern going into this was I really was in love with Far Cry 5. Am in love with Far Cry 5. And I was just like I see the story here, but I don't feel confident that it's gonna be as wide and varied of a world with as many things for you to do, and with the level of complexity and the tactical challenge of, giving you that opportunity to kind of, take a knee outside an encampment and like make decisions on, okay, how am I going to approach taking this thing down? Those concerns were alleviated today. And I feel like this is a game that is now kind of taking the torch of what Just Cause was supposed to be, where there's a little bit more of the crazy in some of the weapons and some of the gadgets and stuff that you get a hold of.
Can I
Yeah, go ahead.
stop you before we roll down into this
Yeah.
too far? Because Saturday's presentation on Far Cry 6 and the slaughter in the boat and the heavy as, Carlo Esposito coming in and grabbing his son, and then the kind of Just Cause-esque chaos of Microsoft's presentation of Far Cry feel very, they are still both part of Far Cry, but they're very dichotomous in terms of the two presentations on a back-to-back. So maybe I'll just keep talking. Yeah. So go ahead and jump in here at any time as your mic. But go ahead. What were you going to say, Swiss?
I'll jump in. I've never played a Far Cry game, but this one at least is made its way onto my radar. So we'll see how dense, my calendar is for gaming. But this it's one that I want to take a spin with. I didn't, I saw, like you said, I saw the gameplay trailer, like, heavy drama, and then, or excuse me, like not the gameplay trailer, like the cinematic trailer type thing, story trailer was very dramatic, and then the gameplay the next day, I think there was like a rooster that you can use as a weapon, so like a cockfighting, but the more Game Logic has talked about his experience with Far Cry, it's kind of made me more excited to pick up and try it out. So this might be the one.
Well, the thing I wanted to ask you, because so they were differentiated in their presentation. Do you feel that in a bad way or a good way or a confusing way? And the thing I'll just throw out is, I think that's a dichotomy that exists in Far Cry 5. I don't have as much experience with 2, 3, and 4, but that it's you get some very, with 5 being like the cultist revolutionists, like you had some very hyper serious, very very heavy handed cinematic, felt like you could have been sitting in the movie theater on Saturday afternoon, deep cutscenes with that to paint the story out. Those were always serious. They were never jokey. But then you go off and you get in a helicopter and you jump out and you go into, a glider wing, and, you interact with these characters who, in mission, right, are very kind of funny, and your memory intermixes that dichotomy. So I don't know. I guess what
I don't know that. I guess to me, it is the challenge of what Far Cry wants to be in terms of, or the sheer nature of presenting them both like that is it attempts to attract both sides of that player, right? Somebody who is looking for the heavy story, even though in Far Cry 5, they had a really interesting story because of the cultist piece, even if they kind of shied away from it, going back to our conversation on Thursday about Ubisoft and their politics in game. That was a time when they were shying away from that. But then by the sheer sandbox nature of what Far Cry open world games are, what most Ubi open world games are, Ghost Recon is right in there, as well as, it's a sandbox, it's a playground, and it allows you to kind of lean into the goofiness of it, or the jankiness of it to some degrees as well. And so that's not a bad thing. It just felt very like the Far Cry from today. I'm much more interested in kind of going around and goofing off in a big old world. The heavy-handed Far Cry aspect of Saturday, maybe not so much.
Yeah, and I think when I think about my Far Cry 5 experiences, I feel like Saturday is a thing that you see and you get exposed to, but the Xbox presentation is what you actually play. So if I think about those things in a time percentage split, what you saw today was like 70 to 80% of your time, and what you saw was a much smaller piece of that. But let's talk about something that I said it was risky last time. I claim that we all were positive about Far Cry 6. Let me try once again and talk about a game that doesn't have any heavy-handedness in it. And so I think we are all upscale on Riders Republic. So DBQ, you want to talk about that? Because I think you and probably Tao paid a little more attention to that than maybe Swiss and I did.
Yeah, I'll toss it over to Tao pretty quick here. So Tao, you've been following it from the beginning, and I am a Johnny come lately to my excitement from this presentation here. It kind of sold me on it. The aspect of the crew kind of smushed together with Steep in a non-snow environment definitely sounds a lot of fun. But you've been interested in this since they announced it last year.
Yeah. It's. I don't think they showed any gameplay last time. I think it was just all CG, and they kind of gave you like little flavor of what you can do, like wingsuits and not skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking and stuff like that. But yeah, you got a good analogy where it's like the crew, like Steep and Trials, and even more recently, like Descenders, where you have that mountain biking gameplay. You're just flying down a mountainside on your bike, and they kind of had a couple of, I think, one preview of that, which it looked even, because it was first person. And I don't know if you can like switch out between third person and first person, or if it locks you in, depending on what you're using at the time. But yeah, this pretty much. I mean, I was already sold before, but like this like cements it. You got this big basically open world. It's a multiplayer world that you can play in, and just jump around to different activities. And there's like a little hub world, and the one kind of trick battle mode that they showed, which just kind of reminded me of maybe like kind of like a Splatoonish kind of a thing, where you kind of do tricks and like color that area to your teams, color red or blue or whatever. I don't know if there's more colors, but and that kind of gives you multipliers, to increase your score and stuff like that. So it just I can't wait for this game, and it's coming out September 2nd of this year. So hope thankfully it's at least this year. They didn't push it back any more than it already had been, because I think it was spring. I believe it was supposed to be May, I think, or at least in the spring. I don't know if they gave it a definite month. But yeah, I'm super excited for this one. And they had that weird. It's like I don't know if like it's a homemade bike. Like you kind of like customize like a bike, and then you're kind of riding that around. It was just kind of a wacky stuff that you can do in this game. It looks really cool.
Well, there were a couple of them, right? So we saw the wacky bike that looked like somebody had kind of taken their apartment and packed it into the back, carrier seat. But then when they were doing what looked like it was a big multiplayer race, and I wanted to say that I saw the words Battle Royale in this presentation, that there was something like it seemed like it was like a very large, like 100-person race.
That big wingsuit kind of race seemed like it was a large, maybe not necessarily a battle royale, but some type of large-scale multiplayer event.
Yeah, I mean, it was wingsuits, bikes, and snowboards. So it was like all the vehicles. But there was another weird, like, larger than dirt bike kind of vehicle in that, where it was like somebody was like one of those ice cream bikes. The bike with like the ice cream carrier thing on the front. Yeah. So I think. So to me, what it seems like, I need to dig in this a little more because I haven't looked at what studio is doing this. I think that this is the spiritual successor to Trials. So
yeah,
because I mean they're not doing a Trials, so as far as I can tell, this is taking the place of that in the lineup.
Yeah, it's been a while since they had the last Trials has come out.
Yeah, I think I want to say this is the same dev. This is what that dev team has been repurposed for or is working on, but I'm not positive. But the other thing that it evoked as I saw this presentation, and particularly when they did the map, that this is. I mean,
so this is the studio that did Steep as well.
Right.
So not Trials, but Steep, which makes sense.
Still makes sense, yeah. There's also it's very much Forza Horizon with extreme sports. Like the map looks virtually the same, and you can go around and do different activities. The thing that I'll be curious to see is, can you choose a career track that allows you to just do the bikes? Because I don't want to be forced to do the snowboarding stuff. if I don't want to do the snowboarding. To me is kind of like the equivalent of drifting in car races. Like, I'm happy for it to be there. I don't mind participating in some of the events. I don't want to be forced to have to do that in order to complete like a campaign run, as Need for Speed has done a couple times in the past. So it'll be interesting to see. I would love to also be like just a wingsuit guy, right, and not have to do the other stuff. But
Yeah, hopefully they have some kind of like free play or something. Because there's like one point where they show like the guy parachuting. He's got the little fan on his back, and he kind of just stops. He's like looking around, like the scenery is like just like a valley, like a desert valley or something. But that looks pretty cool.
yeah,
And that was a spot when one of the devs came out and talked about, there will be a campaign that'll move you through a number of things, but we also understand that people may just want to play and experience and explore individual paths. And so it'd be interesting. Like, it would be nice if they did kind of mini campaigns or championship, tournaments or whatever in each event, rather than having to kind of jump back and forth between all the different ones.
well, it'd be interesting too if it's a Destiny like, where those 3 different sports are like classes, and maybe you don't have to dedicate yourself to one, but where you have different skills. So you could be like level 12 wingsuit, level 5 biker, level 8, on a snowboard. So it'll be interesting. The last thing I'll say before we close up shop about the Ubisoft forward presentation was the play at with Rocksmith Plus. Very interesting to see like a very heavy-handed strategic trajectory taking off in that direction, which evoked old school harmonics approaches in Activision's previous path. That having, I still don't know for certain that was really unsuccessful, or whether or not it was really Activision's greed, wanting to hyper focus on something like annualized releases, and seeing that harmonics well was going to dry up. But Rocksmith Plus is always kind of what people felt like Guitar Hero should have been, is real instruments and an ability to really learn how to play, and the notion of a subscription service, and things that allow you to plug the thing into your computer and your phone, etc. So nothing particularly. I mean, I don't think this is going to be something that I really get into, at least not right away. But it was very interesting, and it's the kind of thing that I'm glad that it exists, because I know that there will be some people who get into that and pull up that subscription.
Yeah, the original one was. I mean, I have it on PlayStation 3, and I played it with my kids. It's hard because it really does force you to do chords, and but again, what you saw feels like an evolution in that, and a nice entry level way to learn how to play. Right? There's lots of good apps for a tablet or a computer, but this feels like here's another way to kind of dive in and teach yourself how to play. Yep.
All right, we're going to skip the conversation about Wholesome Direct, which I'm a little disappointed in, because I really wanted to talk about how this is the year that I may tip over and go ahead and get Switch Lights for my daughters, and I saw a lot of content from this Wholesome Direct that are like the types of games that I would want to get for them to kind of onboard them into more of the gaming sphere, but I'm sure we'll have time throughout the year.
There's some of those on there that I'm definitely going to come back to, like, what was it, Hoa, Hoa?
Oh yeah,
right, again, back to your Ori kind of game.
Yep.
Very pretty. A couple of nice little narrative ones in there as well, so lots of as you said, great opportunities, real diverse mix for kids of all ages, genders, identities.
Yep, and adults too. Because I liked the presentation on Lake. That really caught my interest as something that might be fun to play. But let's go ahead and talk about and go to the main course: Xbox and Bethesda. Twitter lost its mind as this was going on, which I was glad to see. It's very interesting for me because I don't want to not give Microsoft credit, but everybody, on the Innersphere was talking about how today was such a great presentation. And I'm like, as far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been a bad Xbox presentation since Phil Spencer took over. I've liked every single one. I've always felt that they were preferable to me than the Sony sizzle reel approach. And I've always been happier to hear about from like the developer commentary and whatnot that has prevailed, much more so as part of this content. So sure, this year was great. I don't feel like it was some whopping, like, upgrade from previous years, but let's let them bask in their glory for the time being. The first thing I want to talk about is the Battlefield 2042 trailer. Or the whole menagerie of stuff, because there was a ton of content here. Comes out 22 October 2021. Please tell me, because I haven't, I didn't, maybe I should have. Has anyone hit the books and told me what the differentiation here is in the Microsoft Play? So this game is coming to Game Pass? No, not coming to
Game Pass was, so I was looking for this, right? Because this was another question, but the way that they've tagged Game Pass in all of their presentations is at the end of the trailer, you get the card of day one on Game Pass or any type of Game Pass mention, and there was none for this. So this really seems like maybe it'll be the 10-hour preview that EA Play used to do. Maybe it'll be some type of bundle for the fall, because they've obviously there's some type of collaboration transaction here, but nothing that is a Game Pass exclusive, or not even exclusive, but Game Pass. So it's just coming out.
All right, we'll try and continue to dig through that, because I was just thoroughly confused by, like, one of the things about in this presentation was, like, I just lost the thread on whether or not exclusive and Game Pass, whether that was before the gaming announcement or after the gaming announcement. So it faded to black in between, like, the thing, and I was like, at first I thought it was before, then I thought it was after, and I was like, oh crap, I've just completely lost.
Seemed to be after, as far as I could tell, usually. Unless it was different for some games than others, but it looked like it was always after. But I don't know. I guess, yeah, I don't know why this wouldn't be, but they didn't have it on there.
Yeah, it's not though. It's not listed as one of the games that's coming to Game Pass, as DBQ said. So, which is fine. I didn't personally ever felt like it had to, but
I mean, shouldn't it though? Since they got EA Play on there, or not all games are going there.
Yeah, it's up to
Was
EA.
I mistaken on that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's up
Well,
to EA.
even in EA Play, you didn't get the full game. You got, unless you were doing EA Play Pro, which is the $100 one on PC, but the console one for $30 a year gave you the 10 hours, and then you get the vault. But you know those were things that had come later on. Yep.
Maybe
and in Battlefield's 5 case, it came to the vault kind of quickly because the player base was not great, but it's variable based on metrics.
Okay. But some of the key things I caught during this trailer, so the very first trailer, again, everybody kind of lost their minds when it came out, and I'm like, these are all cinematics. Like, we don't know if this stuff is, like, the whole thing about, like, the guy jumping out of the plane and, like, firing a rocket launcher at the other plane and then jumping back into his plane, and, like, I'm like, come on. And but one of the things in that cinematic trailer was the person getting on the ATV and driving it off the top of the building and crashing into a helicopter, and that happened in game today. So some of that at least seems feasible. Also in game were people riding up in elevators, right? In the elevator doors closing, and then you're getting the elevator music. So it appears that there's a lot of environmental hooks on these maps, more so. So I want to say Battlefield 2, when it first came to the 360, I don't think you could go inside the buildings. I think the structures.
Yeah, probably not all the way. And you probably maybe just like little like courtyard area or something, maybe, or like little, like the front.
Not Bad Company, because Bad Company had there weren't skyscrapers in Bad Company. There were like one and two, maybe 3-story buildings as you went through towns, and those you could go in. But like in Battlefield 2, which had the big skyscrapers on the maps, when you would go like where you were like in China or places, and so I don't remember you being able to go inside those buildings. But these environments appeared to be things you could totally go inside. One of the key gameplay aspects was they showed people on grappling hooks. They showed people going across on high lines between buildings. So to me, much greater, symmetry in battle in all of the different vectors and stuff that you could participate in. Love the vehicular stuff that we saw today. Big hallmark of Battlefield. I think in a more pertinent way than Call of Duty implements it. What did you guys think from the things you saw today?
I was pretty impressed with the like you mentioned some of the weapons and stuff, like, or kind of not even the weapons but the accessories, like the grappling hook would look pretty cool. Kind of like, I don't know if that's like you could always have that or if it's just like a one-time thing. There's a wingsuit in this game too. The guy jumped off the building and he opened up his arms and he's like flying around or floating around. I thought it looked pretty cool. To me, I mean, overall, it kind of was like, okay, it's like a little bit more upgraded Battlefield 4, which is fine because I loved Battlefield 4. I played that a whole heck of a lot. I mean, that got me off of Call of Duty for the longest time, actually. So, I mean, I'll probably jump into this game, eventually too, or not even eventually. I'll probably, well, I guess if it's not in Game Pass, I can't get it right away since I'm doing that whole Game Pass thing this year. But definitely something I want to try out and play. So eventually, when it comes to Game Pass, I suppose, or if I get it as a gift, possibly. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. I'm very impressed by this. I just didn't like. I shouldn't say I didn't like 5. It just kind of seemed like the same old to me from 1 a little bit more or less. And obviously they're different eras in those games and the story and stuff. But I don't know this. And maybe I'm kind of over like the World War 1 and 2 and the kind of the past stuff, and the more modern and kind of near future stuff is more my gameplay. So yeah, I definitely want to play this game.
So before I go
Does
on,
anybody?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Swiss.
This might be a segue to the next game too, but does anybody think this game's going to get lost in the shuffle this fall? Feels like that's what happened to Battlefield 5.
Yeah, I don't think it will. I mean, and I think in part because it does change the setting. Where Battlefield 5 felt like a follow-up to Call of Duty, which did World War II. I think that this puts it. The Battlefield community has been ready to go back to modern or near future in terms of just like what Ty was saying. Like, not everybody engaged. There's a reason that Battlefield 4 still is in the in-game launcher for the different Battlefield games because there's still a significant enough population playing it. So I don't know that it will get lost in there. What I do wonder is the Battlefield community big enough to sustain it, or does it attract new players to it as well? And as we wait for Game Logic, I'm just going to say I'm excited for it. I mean, but I enjoy Battlefield more than Call of Duty because I'm traditionally a role player. I mean, I like to play my medic. I like to be an engineer. I'd rather do those types of things than be up and, I can play a support class much better. And so that's where Battlefield has a strength for me.
Well, so one of the questions I want to ask, and I was Tal and you too, DQ. So one of the historic problems in gameplay in Battlefield has been very large maps, depending on where your spawns are, right? Because those change as you take over control points. You can sometimes spawn, and then you have to cross over to the entire opposite side of the map, which, if you don't get a vehicle, can take a long time. And then you get all the way over there, and you get taken out by some sniper, right? And then you start all over again. So, in comparison and contrast to Call of Duty, which is, I love what I love on Call of Duty is I love the smaller maps, right? Now in Call of Duty we're getting a lot of the 6v6, and now the face-off maps are 12v12. You're just constantly, you're always going. So, how do you think that's going to play out this fall? And then DBQ, well, let me give you guys that question first, and then I'll ask you the next question, DBQ.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that only because plus the player count's a lot higher now. It's 128 people, which I'm assuming they're going to expand the maps out, and it's going to be even, it's going to be even a bigger hike. A lot of times a lot of vehicles, or a good amount of vehicles, I shouldn't say a lot. But if you get some people who don't want to wait for you, or you just see the guy take off and it's like, all right, well, I'm pretty much screwed here. I got to hoof it for like literally 5 minutes possibly in this game to get to the other side of the map. But yeah, we'll have to see in how that works out. Or if, I know a lot of times like you can like spawn, I don't know if there's saloon squads in these games or not. Like you can
yeah, I mean Battlefield 5 had it where you can spawn on your squad.
Okay,
and
yeah, I figured they
saves a lot of time there. I think they could do better onboarding of that to encourage people to squad up if they're not But I think even actually Battlefield 5, they kind of stuck you, even if you were randoms, they stuck you in squads to
Yeah.
begin with. So I could also see, given the setting, that they could do something with mobile spawn points as well, that you could have a couple of those, maybe a class has the ability to drop those down on the map or something like that. So
Well,
Maybe everybody has wingsuits, so you can just like glide in, glide in somewhere.
well, the historic problem with this game, right, and it's not just this game but others, but especially this game, right, it's all you sweaty console players listening out there. Like, this is a game that doesn't work if you don't use comms with everyone. Right, and I go back to Battlefield 2 on the Xbox 360 where the comms were just broken and DICE never fixed them. But if you're not coordinating with people, like crossing maps of that size and getting in a random engagement halfway across the map by yourself, uncoordinated, and Tao just mentioned it, like one of the classic problems with, again, Battlefield 2 was the most recent thing that I played on console, right? Because Battlefield 1 and 5 I played on PC. Is, the vehicles don't spawn that frequently, and then they spawn a vehicle, and the person jumps in the vehicle and takes off without you. Now, like I said, now you're running all the way across the map just to get sniped. So it's going to be a problem. DBQ, one of my last things on Battlefield 2042, you mentioned the whole thing about classes, and that, to me, we talked a little bit last week on how Battlefield needs to differentiate itself and choose to do some things better than Call of Duty. And historically, to me, they have always handled classes better. But one of the things I've been considering very recently is, I've been thinking about Destiny 2 and the way that you have those classes, and by the same token, we haven't had any new classes in 7 years. Call of Duty, though, kind of allows you to kind of create your own class, and it puts that power, that configuration, in the hands of the player rather than foist it upon you and lock you into 3 or 4 different size boxes. And you can pick and pack, weapons and lethals and tacticals and, accessories and score streaks into, a class that is, your own. So what do you think about that aspect? And is there anything you can think of that Battlefield can do or should do to combat that?
Sure, yeah, and I think that's even played out in some of the press information around the classes at this point. Like the traditional healer class has the ability, everybody has the ability to heal. The healer class has the ability to heal large quantities of life, or bring somebody back to full versus a quarter. So it's going to be interesting how they balance that, to see how, if everybody can do a little bit of everything for the sake of gameplay, if that kind of, undercuts the class role. I could also see where, in order to strengthen the class roles, that if you're in a squad with, similar to what like Overwatch and some other team-based shooters do, where you can, have X number, you're queuing up based on roles, potentially, that there could be XP buffs for that or something else, that there's an incentive to play different roles within a squad in order to get something, as you're unlocking your battle pass. I don't know, but I'd be curious to see how they do that, because really, when it came in 5, squads, I mean, the roles were not nearly as, everybody could build, everybody had, there was similar shooting aspects you could kind of swap out. But you're right, Call of Duty does do that in a more mix and match function. So I'll be curious to see how they lean into that. And it has the potential to be off-putting to those kind of coming in from other faster shooters as well.
Well, EA may not handle classes and roles well, but there's one type of game that definitely handles roles well, and those are role-playing games. So, Swiss, were you excited at all by Obsidian's new role-playing game that they're going to be rolling out, The Outer Worlds 2? Fast turnaround on that title.
I've never played the Outer Worlds one. This is going to come as a disappointment to you, or maybe not. But no, the answer is no to the Outer Worlds 2. And the game that actually most excited me from that presentation was not even going to be an Xbox exclusive. It's the where are you? Ayuden Chronicles 100 Houses, like the Suikoden type with the Octopath Traveler.
The game coming out in 2023?
Yeah. But, well, they had one that's coming out in 2022. but it's like the Suikoden throwback, and that has like the Octopath Traveler kind of graphical style. But that was the RPG from the Xbox presentation that I liked, and there was nothing in there. It may have been a Game Pass, but I'm pretty sure the game's already been announced for like all the consoles, and it was a Kickstarter.
It was a
originally.
Kickstarter. Yeah. Yep. That's
Yeah.
where it started.
Well,
Well, and I would say that this game, that your game, Swiss, is probably going to come out around the same time as Outer Worlds 2 because we got a teaser trailer, and that's about it.
yeah, and when I say quick turnaround, I mean quick turnaround between release and announcing the next one. I would have.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that like a? I mean, now that we have like the Xbox Bethesda thing going on, like, isn't that kind of a typical Bethesda? Like, it feels Bethesda. Like we got like Starfield like 2 years ago, and then today we're like, oh, we got a little bit. I know we haven't gotten to Starfield yet, but okay, it's like how do you phrase it? It's like Elder. It's like Skyrim in space, right? Is that I think how he phrased it?
Well, we can go ahead and talk about it, right? This is a problem.
Well, if you're on the subject of RPGs, we can like push them together. But
well,
they announced it a long time ago. And we get another little taste, and it's still like wherever. But I don't know.
Well,
I don't think they didn't do really a deep dive on that, did they?
Well, no, and that's the reason it's buried in our agenda and really didn't make a headline out, because I was like, well, we got to talk about Starfield, but I'm like, do we? Like, here's the problem: is of course again the internet and Twitter lost their minds because it led off the show, but I'm like, you guys do realize they still haven't told us anything about this game, like, so we don't know if it's a Mass Effect like, we don't know if it's a BioWare kind of game in space. We don't know if, like you said, Swiss, it's an Elder Scrolls thing in space. We don't know if it's a Fallout game in space. Right, and
we don't know if it's No Man's Sky with like a Bethesda GUI
spin-off. Right. I mean, what I saw today, it did evoke some feelings of Star Citizen, and like I have high hopes for that vector. And then I'm like, this thing could come out and it could curb stomp Star Citizen because they're still trying to figure that thing out. But we don't know because we just saw some neat cinematics. They look gorgeous. Won't argue that. But Swiss, I'm trying to get.
But it was all pre-rendered, right? There wasn't any actual gameplay.
Yeah.
Everything looked gorgeous when it's just pre-rendered.
Yeah.
You're not going to get me too excited about anything from this E3.
Not even
the biggest thing. What? Go ahead.
Not even Age of Empires 4.
It's Age of Empires 2 with fancier graphics. I mean, I'm probably going to get it, but it's Age of Empires 2 with fancier graphics.
Okay, well, because Sony didn't participate, Swiss, there's nothing else I can do. But hopefully, Sony will do something. When is Sony's next day to play? By the way, does anybody know? Okay, well,
I don't know. I'm waiting on Nintendo. Like the big thing, we didn't get to talk about it. I put it on my little highlighter, and you still skipped it. Metal Slug Tactics from the Summer Games Fest. If that's like one of the big things that I put on my Steam wish list coming out the first 2 days, like what does that say about the E3 2021?
That's true. I mean,
I'm about to get on my soapbox.
the industry's still struggling, and I mean, this is part of the effect that I talked about, right? Which is there were a ton of things announced. It was really an overload. I probably make an argument that I don't know that it was all necessary. I mean, they definitely kind of got the gaming, like, I don't know that we needed to be encouraged to spend more money because gamers just spent more money in 2020 than we've historically ever spent in the gaming industry. And today, in these last few days, we've just gotten an overload of information that I don't know. As you mentioned, Swiss, all of it is actually that relevant. One thing,
it's just I don't want to say it's bad. Like there's games here that I'm going to buy, but like I don't think I'm not like overwhelmed. It's not like I came out with like, oh man, Ghost of Tsushima looks awesome. I can't wait for that game to come out. Not yet, but
understood.
We'll see if Zelda.
I tried to get you there with whatever Ninja Gaiden game it was like that. Aragami 2, which kind of feels like it's in that Ghost of Tsushima vein.
There was one that was like really like that. That was back in the Devolver Digital, but I don't think we didn't pull it up.
Okay.
I can't even remember that.
Well,
So
Can't
I'm
remember the
gonna
title.
play the fanboy role here and
Okay.
say I got excited. Like as somebody, as the non Xbox not fanboy, like Swiss and I are the only two that don't have a Series X or S, and Swiss is not getting one. But the Tao and Game, you guys both have one. I'm really curious here because there was a lot that interested me, and I think it's because we get actual gameplay in terms of some of the Halo stuff of multiplayer. We get some nice flying and driving that looks really good, but I'm curious on how the S and X shake out in terms of the differences on some of these as well. But thoughts? I mean, because we didn't really see. I mean, we didn't. That's not what they covered, right? We got trailer after trailer after trailer after trailer, and I think that's where the internet. If you're gonna go back to the Twitter comments, that's probably what sets this one apart more than the last couple. Is we don't get the slowdown to talk about the game studio that we bought. We get here's a trailer from the game studio we bought 2 years ago. And I think that's probably the potential that we're seeing starting to come forth.
Well, and notice there were in similar vein, there wasn't a super strong drum beat about like XS optimized, like, which I think was a good move because people can't buy them. Like, and I went to the Microsoft store while it was going on, and I was like, that would be a nice move to say, hey, Microsoft X's, Series X's are available in the store now or whatever, but they weren't. So thank you for not like constantly yammering about them, because people can't buy them. Um, from my perspective, I will say playing Call of Duty most recently and seeing how some of the textures don't fill in and whatnot, I have tipped over and said I'm buying an X, when I can, when it's available. I like the S for what it does, um, but I want an X. That's just me. I'm sure it meets the needs of some other people, and it meets my needs for right now. You know for terms of systems availability, I don't feel the need to like by any means expend over retail for an X. Um, but you know, I guess the question is, did I see anything today that made my purchase feel justified and excited about owning an S or even eventually an X? Sure. I mean, I think the games that we saw today, and I think Microsoft played it well. They're going to look great on X and S on whatever resolution monitor you play them on. Um, for me as an Xbox fan, as an Xbox owner, and I own a PlayStation as well, but again, I don't need like what do they have now? 27 studios? Did I just double that? 15, 17? I can't even remember. Like, I'm not the person who needs a first party title from every single one of those studios every year, right? Look, I got what I wanted today. I got Battlefield 2042, which I can play on any platform, quite frankly. I'm not a big Halo. I mean, I love the Halo single player campaign. I'm not a Halo multiplayer guy, so you know, but the important thing to me is I'm getting Forza Horizon 6, which is a weird play. 5, sorry, yeah, 5. You know, but which I'm sure is going to look great on the Series X or S. So I'm good. I don't know. What about you, Tao? I know Halo Infinite dropped today. Do you feel like they made up for their thing for last year? Are you excited now about Halo?
I mean, I was excited even from the last one. I mean, I thought it looked great. It's Halo. I mean, Halo. I don't know if Halo was ever, the graphics powerhouse. I mean, even though, I mean, maybe back in the day, and then it was kind of just there to me at least. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I was excited for it. And can I just ask, what happened? I walked away and I came back, and you guys are just like in this whole like downward spiral for Xbox. Like, I don't know what happened there. But no, yeah, but I am excited for it. I mean, I played pretty much every Halo game, and like I said, I was already excited last time. I mean, just give me a grappling hook, I'll play any game with a grappling hook in it. So it's all I need. That was one of my big things with the Battlefield too, or Battlefield 2042. But no, yeah, I'm excited for it, and Did you guys did I miss like some of the games you guys are talking about?
No, we kind of just jumped right into the RPG pieces of it. So we missed the first person shooters. We talked about Battlefield. You were there. No, you haven't missed anything, but you missed some of the excitement. So thanks for bringing it back. But yeah, I am interested in I really enjoyed Halo 5's multiplayer, even though it quickly outpaced me in terms of my skill ability, but I definitely stuck with that for probably 6 months, and that's not something I normally do. And I'm not a historic Halo player either, so I enjoyed it, and I'm curious to see what else they add to it. Right, some of the large team battles and things like that that I would assume that are coming back here. Horizon 5 looks beautiful. I'm really curious to see how that, what that looks and how it runs on different units, but I'm in. That looks great. Looks like a whole lot of fun. I'll fly around as a jet for the DLC for Top Gun Maverick in Flight Simulator. Sure, why not? I think that aspect, the kind of, in some ways, right? The flight sims and driving games are always nice visual showpieces. The fact that we got a Horizon versus a regular Motorsports is an interesting polyphony view. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, lots of content there. I'm less, I don't know. I'm more interested in what Xbox showed today than what they've shown in the last couple of years in terms of what's coming out. So, and maybe that's just, maybe I'm in a different spot right now, but I think they had a good show. I think they gave people a reason to, I was surprised that we didn't hear anything as a follow-up to kind of the news from last week about the Game Pass everywhere aspect of, the dongle on your TV and other things, that like all these things that they were dropping with Game Pass, to me felt like, here's another 1-2 punch of how else you can play these. Like, yes, maybe you can't buy an X or find one, but here's this $50 device that will stream it to you, or something even less, given the price of Chromes and Fire Sticks and things like that.
Well, just notice the theme throughout all of today. There was no mention of hardware, and I think, I'm guessing, I'm speculating that it wasn't so much because they didn't want to talk about hardware, but because they wanted to entirely focus on software to shut the people up who are, Xbox doesn't have any games, Xbox doesn't have any first party titles. I think Phil Spencer was just like, here, right? Here's all the titles, right?
And I think they've shown that they can get press coverage outside of an E3 cycle for hardware. So they can come back to that at a different point in time, and this is a good time to just focus on games.
Yeah, I think it's always been like that too, though. I mean, they always kind of just focus on games. I mean, unless there's a a big console change, obviously, but I think for the most part, they've pretty much always just said games. Yeah, during the E3 conferences, at least.
Yeah. Let's walk out with a couple sizzle reel comments. As Swiss mentioned, Starfield, Stalker 2 coming to Xbox. That is a timed exclusive. So very interesting that it's deploying. Again, looks great. These guys are kind of in the vein of kind of Maddox. Maddox may not be the right developer name, but similar to the Metro guys, where they have a really high mark when it comes to graphical fidelity, and that's kind of what we saw today. Back 4 Blood is on Game Pass, DBQ?
Yes, it is. Day 1, Back 4 Blood.
Okay, so that will be a big deal. 12 Minutes, also on Game Pass, if I'm not mistaken.
Day 1, Game Pass.
And I think with James McAvoy, Willem Dafoe, and Daisy Ridley employed on that, again, that to me is a spotlight indie title. That's now going to be on Game Pass, where maybe a lot of people wouldn't play it, if it weren't. Swiss, were you going to say something?
Was that like 2 years ago that they first announced that game? The 12 minutes one?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Diablo 2 Resurrected coming to Xbox. That looks interesting. AoE 4, again, I'll go back to that just a little bit. It's just kind of weird. That's not coming to Xbox. The label I saw on it was Windows 10. So I don't know why it was in this press conference, but okay, fine. Maybe Xbox is the brand that's all about games, regardless of PC or Xbox. And then
Can I make
yeah, go ahead.
another quick comment? I thought I saw something about, and I was trying to look for it and I couldn't find it, but I thought it said something about PC and then xCloud. I saw it.
Yes. Yeah. That xCloud label was on, I want to say, almost. I mean, it was prevalent throughout the conference. I just ignored it because I don't care about
Okay.
xCloud. But DBQ mentioned, I won't go into all the business analysis and development analysis on the Forza franchises. There's some weirdisms going on there by development cycle. It should be a motorsport title coming out now, not a Horizon, and so it feels like they pulled an Activision Black Ops where they re-engaged the team that more recently did a popular title there for some reason. I also kind of want to dig a little bit later about some speculation about what may or may not be going on with those two teams, because historically Turn 10 has done the whole reason for Forza Motorsport really had become those guys built the engine, and then Playground Games took that engine work and made the fun. So somewhere, so either Forza Horizon 5 is either still running on the Forza Motorsport 7 engine, which it shouldn't be unless they've ridiculously scaled it for XS optimization. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. And then Redfall, another 4-person co-op shooter utilizing vampire Swiss, so they're not going back to zombies. So hopefully that'll help you out.
How'd you know that was going to be my comment on Redfall?
One undead thing for another.
But vampires have a much greater varied power set, so that will be interesting. And it looked like each of those vampires were different types, so they can each do, they must have classes or something where they can each, have different attacks, so that will make it tactically interesting.
The other thing about that game, I'm pretty sure that one was a console exclusive. I'm pretty sure they did flash that on Redfall. So
yeah, along with 2022, right? Like yes.
Yeah. Yep. Summer 2022. Yeah. PC and console.
Yeah, and the thing that's
Actually,
really
no,
the thing that's really exciting about it to me is this is Arcane Studios, which I think is just a studio that doesn't get the kudos that it should. Like Dishonored and Prey, maybe they're not as good as some other games overall, but they are unique in their placement in the market and what they do. And it's definitely a design element that is not trying to copy what everyone else is doing with those titles. And so I'm excited about their notion of getting into a 4-player co-op shooter space. Gentlemen, anything else that we want to go over tonight?
Just real quick, I wanted to just say I was actually pretty excited for that Horizons 5. It looked pretty cool. I mean, just obviously graphically it looks gorgeous, but I mean, it just looks kind of fun. And I never really played any Forza or even the other Horizons games, even though I knew that it's a little bit more forgiving than just the mainline game. So that's probably one I'm going to definitely try out once it comes to Game Pass. And then Atomic Heart was another one that I'd never heard of it before, and I thought just bizarre and weird. Like you have kind of psychic powers, I guess, or something's going on there. But that looked pretty good too. So I'm definitely waiting on that one. Which I don't know if they had a release date for that one or not. But that's another one I'm going to be looking forward to. And I think that's coming out for pretty much everything. But they had it on the Xbox side, so that was just 2 titles. Looked good.
Yeah, and I don't want to get it mistaken. I'm very excited for the Forza Horizon's title. It's just my only comment is not what I was expecting, not what I don't know that most of the industry would have expected. Like I said, given the way those dev cycles had previously been working, so something has gone on. I just don't know, what it is.
They're not turning into what's the Sega or not Sega? What's the Sony?
Polyphony.
Yeah, where they could just whatever. They'll take their time. It'll be like another 5 years or something.
And if that's
fine.
If that's the explanation, if creating a new Forza Motorsport engine took extra time because of the platform shift, that to me is an acceptable explanation, and I'm fine waiting. At that point, then I'm more bothered by the notion that Forza 5 is still running on the Forza Motorsport 7 engine, because then I'm like, well, now you've just done a palette swap and an upscale, and I'm like, and changed the setting, which maybe that's enough, for a Forza Horizon on Game Pass, right?
Well, that's coming out for Xbox One too, so most likely it is.
Yeah.
And they're just going to optimize it for the series
True.
uh,
True.
consoles. So
Yeah, and that might be fun because again, it's a problem that we don't have a driving game on the console that's supposed to be the driving game console. So, Swiss.
Well, that makes sense, right? That's how they could turn it around as quickly as they did too, right? That this is
Well, right, because that's the other thing. I'm like, there shouldn't have been any way feasible for that studio, right, to turn around a driving game while they're working on Fable. So, but yeah, but that's a way to get that quick low hanging fruit, right? That keeps the pumps running without drowning a team in crunch and overtime. Swiss, anything you want to mention about the Borderlands 2 movie? Going back to the GearBox presser?
Just that I didn't want to have 15 minutes of Randy Pitchford pitching a movie in a video game conference. And Ubisoft, I'm also giving you the stink eye. But other than beyond that, like one the one game we didn't mention was Mario Rabbids, the sequel, like Sparks of Hope or something.
Yep.
But I have concerns because they're like, we want to add more action elements in it. I'm like, I hope that it doesn't lose its.
I think it looks fun. I mean, the way it looks, and we'll probably get more of this at the Nintendo one. It looks like you get that little white outline of a zone, and instead of it being tiles, you have the ability to move around there, maybe for a certain period of time, or
If they go the Valkyria Chronicles route, yeah, it could be fun. I just that's my like. Well, it could work. It might make kind of undermine the formula. So
does that make it easier? That route. Because that game was hard to me, like super hard. That first one, maybe just because I don't play those games usually. It's just I don't know.
Don't bow down to the casuals, Ubisoft.
I have to.
All right, guys. Great show tonight. I think hopefully we're on the downhill stretch now with the remainder. Maybe we could just casually watch the other stuff and then just really perk up. Do we have anything major left besides Nintendo?
Oh, I was about to say Nintendo.
Capcom, I think, is in there. Don't they have a conference?
Yeah, Capcom has a conference tomorrow, I think, or at least a direct-like type of thing.
Yep. Yeah, well, yeah, some kind of which is kind of weird because I don't think they've ever had one before, have they? Or at least not recently.
No, they haven't had their own thing, and it's I don't know what's the big deal for them to show if they've already put Resident Evil Village would have been the thing, but they've.
Right, Street Fighter, maybe.
Yeah, but I don't.
Monster Hunter.
Monster Hunter, yeah. I was gonna say there's Monster Hunter something or other.
They could do 10 minutes of just a Monster Hunter, a new one, and that'd be enough for. Yeah.
But again,
how long has World been out?
World's been out
a couple of years now.
3 years, 2 years.
19?
I think 2
years. I think 19.
Yeah.
There's no way to know.
Yeah, maybe because Monster Hunter, they just did Rise, and we know Monster Hunter Stories is coming.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
Well, there's a Monster Hunter movie, so they're probably going to spend 20 minutes on that.
I think that came out already.
I want to see what happens on the Nintendo Direct, Swiss, when they spend time on their amusement park and their Imagination Minions Mario movie. So we'll see how you feel about this come Thursday.
And that
2018. January 2018 was Monster Hunter World.
Okay, and that Monster Hunter movie was horrible.
Oh, you watched it?
Came out.
I watched it and reviewed it. It was not.
Oh boy.
Like unless you're a deep, and I appreciate movies where you have to be like deeply into the lore, like where you can't get the meat of the movie unless you're like, but like, yeah, Monster Hunter, you just had to be like the uber crazy like Kingdom Hearts level like fan to extract. Like it was just not a good action movie. Like in general, and so unless you were really deeply into the lore, like it didn't do anything for you. So, all right, gentlemen. Well, I will see you guys Thursday night. We'll obviously be talking throughout the week. Thanks so much for rapidly turning this around and pull it into this show. And good on you, Xbox and everybody else around the industry who put something out for this week.
Oh, well, and television too is tomorrow. And Verizon. I don't know what they're gonna.
What Verizon?
You stopped the wrap up for Intellivision?
That's right. Hey,
people, it's the end of the night. Let's go.
All right.
And then Bandai Namco.
That's true. That might I might be more interested in that than Capcom. All right, so on behalf of the E2KG network, this has been the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games Podcast, Special Edition E3 Coverage Part 1. We'll talk to you guys again Thursday night, right back here on this channel about 8:30-ish p.m. Eastern. So until next time, play the games that you like. Come here to talk about the games that you love. Take care of yourselves and stay safe out there. That's going to do it for us tonight. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. We are out of here.